Bismi, I understand this is the last session. I understand in this heat it's very difficult to concentrate. So I won't take a lot of your time, but for the title, I must say that it's a little more than that's indicated. I kind of say Kudumbashri in the title, but it's actually a little more than that. The reference is really to very different kinds of governmental interventions in welfare that have been poured into this particular site that I'm going to talk about. Now this is actually from research that was done in a fishing hamlet, a small fisher village in the coast of the Trivandrum district, Adivalathura, between 2013 and 2015, and then we kept following up what was happening there. There was another survey conducted around 2017. We have been in touch till Okchi and after. Now I want to kind of contextualize this because we're talking about a rural community. Now the debate on democracy and rural transformation in India has been a very large one. And you know that in the post-millennium period, this debate has been led by people like Partha Chatterjee and others who look at the politics of the countryside shaping in the context of increasing neoliberalization. So, Partha Chatterjee, for example, and many scholars who follow his lead, seem to imply that dispossessed communities in cities, urban areas, are more resilient in some way. The kind of petty entrepreneurship that they undertake in city slums seems to provide them with a more stable kind of livelihood, income, etc. While the rural communities are taken to be, fighting for survival. In fact, they have, if you look at it, rural incomes are not great anymore. In the post-millennium period, definitely rural incomes are not great. But you see rural people fighting for their resources in movements and so on. In cities, etc., obviously they seem to be more secure, in the sense that they seem to have a little more of economic opportunity and possibility, even if not security in the proper sense, because after all, labor in the city is also very precarious. But what you see is that they do not have, they kind of are not really able to form collectives to fight back. Despite having a little better, in terms of opportunities. In the rural countryside, opportunities are failing, incomes are failing, livelihoods are at a serious threat. Yet you find more resilience. Now this has been a question that has come up in the discussion on rural livelihoods in the post-millennial period. Now perhaps it's also very interesting if you put this insight into the context of sociology and anthropology in India, especially rural sociology. So in fact, this kind of an insight that rural communities, despite all the odds, are fighting this land acquisition and disposition, etc. This kind of cautions against a stereotype of rural changelessness. That for a long time sociology and anthropology kind of assumed what is called the unchanging rural India. Now that's obviously, and this insight shows that that doesn't work anymore. But it also perhaps indicates that the current thesis that villages are being hollowed out because of a host of processes, particularly globalization and liberalization. Maybe that's also not that true. In some senses, the village is fighting back in some ways. How exactly needs to be probed and that kind of a question, how exactly are villages being probed, is perhaps a question for empirical research. Exactly how. And I'm trying to do something of that kind. So the backdrop for this kind of research is essentially a shift in the post-colonial developmentalist state. So, which is moving towards neoliberalism everywhere in the country and in Kerala as well. So, you find that this news, do you have a problem? Sure, you can leave if you want, you don't have to talk. Okay, so this new state mediates what is called the regimes of dispossession. Now you have what is called regimes of dispossession. And as we all know, it presides over jobless growth at the moment, we don't know that. And it exists, it actually threatens the very existence of rural communities. So that's a backdrop in which I'm trying to look at this particular site. So in Kerala, of course, there's a little difference in the way this happens. One is, of course, that post-colonial developmentalist welfarism has not died down. It has kind of mutated. I mean, it's definitely been recast in neoliberal terms. So the rhetoric right now is of self-help. The welfare is almost without exception directed towards individual families rather than community services and so on. So welfarism in Kerala has been neoliberalized, no doubt, but it survives. Unlike in many other parts of India, it has survived the right-wing onslaught for at least the past 5 years. This much we know. But then, it's not as if dispossession is absent. If you think about the Dubai Port Trust, so it's not just Pinarayi Vijayan, by the way. It precedes Pinarayi Vijayan. So it goes right back to the Dubai Port Trust. In fact, the Vallarpadam controversy, where the state actually mediated the dispossession of land in the name of development and actually in the name of growth for private capital. And that has only grown, that tendency has only grown through the UDF government regime. It's become even more powerful in the present regime. So Vizhinjam, for example, was the Vizhinjam port, the International Container Terminal project, has been consistently supported by all parties, all political parties, equally. And the present government has been supporting the project, even despite the kind of loss that we have suffered during the very inclement weather last year, which actually affected Kerala's resource position. Even despite that, the project has been supported. So we are definitely living in a time when the post-colonial state is changing its color. But in Kerala, what is special is that despite the change of color, the focus on welfarism, the focus on distributing welfare, however neoliberalized, has not been given up. So that's the context. So the community I want to focus on is, as I told you, the fishing village called Adimalathura in the coast area of Trivandrum. And what I want to really talk about is the unique role that women in this community have played in maintaining resilience in hard times. I mean, if you even a brief look at the history of the fisher community in the Trivandrum coast will tell you that incomes have been falling. Incomes from their main source of livelihood, which is fishing, have been steadily falling since the 1980s at least. So there's a lot of distress on the coast. And you actually find, and my argument is that if you are a visitor then, I mean, I was a visitor to this village in the 1980s when the fish worker mobilization, the independent fish worker mobilizations against the excessive capitalization of fish resources was happening in that area in the 1980s. I remember how this village used to look like. It is, I cannot describe it to you how utterly miserable a place it was. If you visit it at the same place now, you will see that it has changed remarkably in very positive directions. I mean, it's a far more livable dignified place. Now, and this shift happened, remember, at a time when income from fishing fell, did not improve. Now, how did that happen, if you ask? Of course, it's a bigger question, but I'm going to offer you a little bit of that answer, only a little bit. There's much more to talk about, which I will not go into. But that little bit is about the role that women in that community have played in achieving that transformation into a much more livable place. And secondly, I'm trying to look at women's agency and resistance, in what is called the patriarchal bargain in this context. Now, like almost any other community in the country, this little community is also a patriarchal community. It is a community in which men definitely are dominant. Nevertheless, and there is a particular kind of bargain that women have struck with patriarchy there, which has determined the kind of agency that they have and the sort of resistance that they're capable of. Now, I want to give you a brief account of how that changed since the 1970s. So this idea of the patriarchal bargain, if any of you is interested, is from a Turkish researcher called Deniz Kandiyoti. And she talks about it as basically it refers to the woman's decision to conform to the demands of patriarchy to gain some kind of benefit. So you agree to what the patriarch tells you to do, expecting that you will gain something from it. It's not some blind submission because you're afraid. It's not just fear that's prompting you to obey the patriarch, but the expectation that you will get something from it. And that's called a patriarchal bargain. So this is, as students of economics, I don't need to talk about it a lot, because obviously you know that agents always bargain, right? What do agents do? They have a preference. They have a set of preferences and they will go for the best of those. Best bargain. And they will actively negotiate to bargain. So if you treat women as rational agents, then they will bargain. And how will they bargain? They will bargain within the options that they have. So the patriarchy definitely sets the frame of reference within which they can bargain. Now, what I'm going to show you is how changes in politics and policy can shift this bargain. The possibilities of the bargain change when women enter politics and policy. Politics, when I say politics, I'm not talking about party politics. I'm talking about politics as basically very fundamental arrangements of distributing power in society. So, obviously, if you look at the literature, of course, and for me this was an interesting topic, if only because the kind of role that women play in rural resilience is very under-researched. This is for the benefit of any of you who may want to be already in research or may want to do some research. This is a very under-researched area. We all know that women do contribute hugely, and you know that there's a lot of literature on how women are vital to propping up communities that are threatened by poverty. So there's a vast literature on that now. And it's quite well documented, but then it ends up as essentially justifying the feminization of responsibility and obligation. So in some sense, there's a romanticization of that role that women perform, which ends up being, which ends up justifying their responsibility and obligation. Now, my idea is not really to do that. My idea is really to show you how it changes when women enter politics and policy as a welfarist policy, that is, as a policy interventions, that is. So there are three things I want to kind of show in this. One, that the patriarchal bargain may not always be passive subjection of women to the community goals, or it may also be not the case that they sustain family obligations fully within accepted terms of domestic dedication. In fact, these terms of domestic dedication may actually change. Number 2, rural resilience in the face of multiple emerging threats is perhaps not reducible to exclusively materialist survivalism. So it's not, when you're talking about rural resilience, it's not enough to talk about material survival. Okay, this community is surviving materially, so then fine. A community is much more than its material survival. There are probably all different kinds of social norms, etc., that define the community. So the community members themselves may not recognize community survival in just material reproduction. Thirdly, it's very important that we do not romanticize or exaggerate the women's role in ensuring the resilience of the community. So now, the research that we did actually indicates that the state's shift towards neoliberal capitalism in Kerala, anywhere else, including Kerala, is a serious threat to rural communities, including the community I'm talking about, the one we did research in between 2015 and 2013 and 2017. And welfarism, if welfarism is not entirely hollow in these places, that's only because women in these places have used it imaginatively to their ends. So in some sense, these women have exercised agency in deciding how to use the welfare resources that flow into the community. So they add, that's one thing. The second thing is they have also translated the values and roles and relationships acceded to them within traditional arrangements into a voice of their own as part of the democratic upheavals in their community in the between the 1970s and 1990s. So this community faced a certain political mobilization between 1970 and 1990s because of the fish worker mobilization. Women were active participants in that. Now that allowed them to translate some of their traditional strengths into a proper voice later. So this is very important if you think, because it influences the ways in which the women use welfare resources and how they negotiate with the neoliberal governmental welfare system itself. So in some ways, or to put it very simply, the transformation of the patriarchal bargain in and through democratizing struggles in that community contributed very hugely to women's capacity to contribute to community resilience at a later date. So that's a thing. Now, so this is a chance then, naturally, to reflect on the agency that women of extremely disempowered communities may have through their participation in popular struggles on the one hand and governmental interventions on the other. So remember that this is a community that is extremely poor. It's a very, very underprivileged community. Remember, and this study becomes also relevant because when we talk about agency, we usually talk about a whole set of factors that might contribute to women's agency, like their education, their class location, their caste location, many other things, their social capital, many other things we kind of take into account. Remember, this is a community where none of this exists. The women of Adimalattura do not have any of these advantages. Most of them do not have any of these advantages that we talk about when we talk about agency. So therefore, this study becomes important in that sense also. So let me tell you a little more about the site. This is one of the poorest communities in the fishing villages. Now, the Trivandrum coast is generally a poor area because you know that in Kerala, the fisher community is one of the most disadvantaged groups. Out of this, Adimalattura is even more disadvantaged. So it's well known. It has a history of being prone to all kinds of ecological trouble. So there are freak floods, for example. This phenomenon that's called Kalla Kadal. of the sea suddenly just entering the place and staying there for days together, for weeks together. So every house, everything goes underwater for days, for weeks on end. It's called Kariavattom. And Adivilathuru is an area particularly prone to that kind of disaster. It has very severe drinking water shortage. And historically, it is an area which, it was a reclaimed area. It was a kind of an ecologically fuzzy interface between land and sea. Because right behind there is a lake, and this is a kind of tiny little bit of land that sticks between the lake, a hill, and the sea. So it's a ecologically fuzzy kind of interface. It was a swamp. It was an uninhabited swamp. It was settled with assetless fishermen from Tamil Nadu by community capitalists in the neighboring Pulluvula village. The neighboring Pulluvula village has a history of migration to Sri Lanka in the 19th century, which brought capital, which brought some excess capital to the village. And those who had that capital invested it by extending fishing grounds in Adivilathuru. So Adivilathuru was a wild area. It was full of, it was a swamp, it was full of water, it was a marshy land, so not inhabitable. It was colonized by fishermen from Pulluvula, and the fisher, you could call them community capitalists. They invested money in boats. They brought assetless labor from Tamil Nadu, from the fishing communities, allowed them to settle down in this marshy area. So you can see that the history of Adivilathuru is one of a proletarian settlement. It's a settlement of assetless fish workers, extremely poor people. So I did a micro history of the site, and the older people, the very old people, told me how it was shameful in their generation to marry any girl to Adivilathuru, because it was supposed nobody in the fishing villages would want their daughters to marry into Adivilathuru, because it was considered to be a very hard life there. So actually the village of Adivilathuru comprises of two wards, two coastal wards, in what is a predominantly mainland panchayat. So you can imagine the consequences of that. For the Kottayam panchayat, these are just two wards, and in the calculations, the development calculations of the panchayat, these two wards don't really figure that much, and their needs are very different from the needs of other areas. So it's roughly around 1,134 households. And as I told you, there's definitely much improvement since the 80s now. Houses, a large number of the houses are pakka houses with private latrines and electric connections, and some 12 kilometers of road surrounding the village. So our work was based on, and of course, fishing is largely non-mechanized craft. The boat owners in Adivilathuru own non-mechanized craft for most. So our sample was roughly 220 households from the 1,130 total, and it was a three-stage kind of research. It had a survey, and there was a survey to get a sense of the population. Then oral history to generate oral narrative-based history to capture the micro-history of that site. And then some extensive semi-structured interviews with women leaders. So out of the 47 Kudumbashree leaders, we interviewed 21. And of course, many more people were interviewed. Microhistory involves a very, very large number of interviewees. So if you look at this site, if you look at social life in this site, it doesn't conform to what Denise Candiotti calls classical patriarchy. She says that women bargain with different kinds of patriarchy, and South Asia particularly is known to house what is called classical patriarchy.